Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to do something that I don't often do on the channel because most of my videos are about reviews of TV shows and films and different news in the sci-fi and fantasy genre that relates to sci-fi movies and shows and games and things. But occasionally I feel a need to do a response video, or at least to make comments in response to things that other YouTubers are saying. And that's what this is going to be. This is going to be a response to a video put out by Midnight's Edge and narrated by Einherjar, assuming I pronounced that correctly, which I probably didn't, wherein he talks about his personal feelings on the Batman movie, which I find troubling. He talks about how he didn't think it was going to be good based on the stuff that came out before because it was being directed by Matt Reeves, who comes from Bad Robot, which he views as politically motivated, and that he was pleasantly surprised with the movie up to a certain point, but that after that point, the movie became one of the worst Batman movies and fell apart. Those are his words. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And here's the problem that he has. He says that the whole falling apart thing started with the line in the film where Lena Kyle talks about how she's upset over all the corruption in the city that is the fault of rich white people, rich white men. And he says that from that point on, he found the movie to be terrible. And he thinks it's one of the worst Batman movies because of that line and some other stuff in the film that he calls the subtext. These people, this anti-woke crowd who generally are conservative, have a bug up their butts about subtext. Now, of course, subtext is a thing, but I think sometimes they're imagining what the subtext is in a particular case. They're seeing subtext where it isn't. So the subtext in the Batman, in his view, is there to comment on contemporary American politics or contemporary American life or society. And the commentary that it's offering is that white men are bad and rich people are bad. And it's just insane because of his reasoning. The reason he says that's the subtext is because none of the bad guys in the film are anything but white. Actually, what he says is all of the white men in the movie are bad. So Penguin, Falcone, Maroni, the chief of police, or the commissioner rather, and the attorney general, and even Alfred, who apparently, in the movie he says there are things in his past that weren't the greatest behaviors that he engaged in, and even Thomas Wayne is depicted in the film as having gotten his hands a little dirty dealing with Falcone. So all the white men in the movie are bad. And this is because Matt Reeves has an agenda and a political point of view. And he did that to express that political point of view as subtext in the film. The problem with that is that Penguin is white in the comics going back decades, okay? Falcone is white in the comics, also going back decades, though perhaps not as many. I'm not sure when that character originated, but it's a long time ago. If I'm not mistaken, Maroni is white in the comics and has also existed for decades. Alfred has always been white and has existed from the beginning. We're talking about 80 years ago. So what is he saying the movie would have to have done in order for him not to feel as though this subtext of white men are bad was present. I'm not familiar with any black villain characters in the Batman comics that they could have used in place of Penguin and Falcone and Maroni, for example. And they already made Commissioner Gordon black, which I'm surprised they didn't complain about that. They probably have in another video, because you can't win with these people, because that's race swapping, you know. So I don't understand, like I said, what they would have wanted the movie to do. I don't think those characters exist. They wouldn't have wanted them race swapped, I don't think. Not in addition to Commissioner Gordon having been race swapped. They surely would have complained about that. So how could Matt Reeves possibly have won with this crowd and have put out a film that didn't get accused of having this white men are bad subtext? Make all the villains female? Make all the villains new characters of color? Can they not accuse a film of subtext aimed at vilifying white people unless the bad guys are always black? Like, what's it gonna take? Do you have to have movies where the bad guys are always people of color in order for you not to accuse the film of sending a message that white people are bad? Now, this is probably where they would say, no, it's about balance. The casts should be mixed. There should be bad black people and bad white people. Right. Well, in a property like Batman, how do they do that? Make up new characters? I mean, I suppose they could. But is that really what the fans want? Don't the fans want to see the established characters? Penguin, Falcone, etc. So I don't understand how it is that they can say these things. Because if they had done something different, surely they would have had different complaints about that. So I don't understand that. Some of the other stuff he says he doesn't like is the fact that, you know, Gotham is depicted as this corrupt place, and the corruption is the fault of the establishment, and the establishment is white, and, you know, that's just more subtext and sort of, I think he was trying to say anti-capitalist, you know, because it's rich people doing it, right? So Gotham has always been corrupt to a certain degree, to one degree or another over the years. That's always been part of the problem, that it's a bad place, a corrupt city. At least for a long time, it's been that way. So why weren't they complaining in the past when that's been the case? The whole reason that Batman exists, at least in the recent lore, going back a long time, is because Gotham is a hellhole of corruption and crime. That's at least as far back as Batman Begins. So I don't understand what Matt Reeves was supposed to do. What was the plot supposed to be? You know, the movie I discussed in my review video that the movie it takes you know, its plot points heavily from Batman Year One, Batman Earth One, and I forget, there was one other comic book. Oh, The Long Halloween. So a lot of the stuff in the movie about corruption is in the comics. I mean, I already said this. It's been that way for a long time. So the stuff in the movie is not Matt Reeves writing subtext to send a message. He's carrying over the story points and the setting from the source material. So what are you talking about, dude? You know, another thing he didn't like, if I'm remembering correctly from the video, is that Catwoman says something about, you know, how Bruce Wayne is a rich boy and is therefore out of touch, or, you know, not living in reality. And even the mayor-elect at one point says he needs to do more. So again, it's anti-white sentiment, anti-rich person sentiment. But the fact is that in real life, rich people often have blind spots about what real life is. That's just a thing. It just exists in reality. So now what he's saying is that a movie can't depict things that are real without being accused of having an agenda-driven subtext. It's just ridiculous. There are a lot of people who have a whole lot of money that really should be doing more for the world than they are. I mean, a lot of rich people with a lot of money do a lot for the world, but they don't all. It's just a fact that they could be doing more. So why can't that be said in a movie? Especially if it's the case that when she says that, when the character says that to a rich person, as is the case in this film, it's true. like it's true in the movie. He could be doing more as Bruce Wayne, but he doesn't get involved in that stuff, as he tells Alfred. He just focuses on his Batman activities and not philanthropy. So it's just true. So why can't that be pointed out? And the point of pointing it out is to show that, at least in the early days, he was so lost in the Batman character that he wasn't being Bruce Wayne, and that he wasn't necessarily living up to his father's legacy. And that's pointed out because it's to show that Batman is not a paragon. He's not perfect. Bruce Wayne is not perfect. It's so that later they can develop the character and he can change and grow. So that's what storytelling is. You sometimes start out with characters that are not living as their ideal self, their best selves, and they grow and change over time. So, and that relates to the human condition, because it's something that people go through in real life. You know, and throughout the video, he says that the best, shows like early Star Trek and stuff have subtext that speaks to the human condition. Well, that's what that is. The whole point about him being out of touch because he's rich, as I said, rich people have blind spots, and it's something that they should strive to overcome, so that they're not living in a fantasy. So to point that out it's not political. It's not agenda. It's telling a story about human beings who are flawed. So I don't understand what the heck he was talking about. Besides all of that, the fact of the matter is that corruption is a thing that exists in real life. So whether it was in part of the Batman mythos or not for the city of Gotham isn't even relevant. It is, but it doesn't matter, because corruption of the kind depicted in this movie exists in real life. And it's just a fact that the system is dominated by white people and older men, or white men. That's just reality. So why can't a movie depict that without being accused of having an agenda or deliberately, having a subtext that's like code for a put down of white people? It's just reality. And I wouldn't care if it was just his opinion that that's not a good thing to do in movies, but that's not what he said. He said the movie falls apart and is one of the worst Batman movies because of these things. That's just not true. One of the other things he says is that, just consider that the line about all of the problems being because of rich old white men that Selina says is just her opinion, right? Or I don't know about just her opinion, but it's her opinion. So what he's saying by saying that line makes the movie fall apart is that because a character has that opinion in the movie falls apart. Well, why? There are Black people in real life who have that opinion. So why can't a Black character in a movie have that opinion, whether it's true or not, without the movie being accused of falling apart because the character has that opinion? Again, it's depicting something that's real, that people are jaded against old rich white people. Whether they should be or not, whether that's a flaw on their behalf, can be talked about. But the fact that they have that opinion and it comes out in the movie doesn't make the movie one of the worst Batman movies and doesn't make the movie fall apart. It's just one point of view of one character. And his suggestion is that Matt Reeves put that in there because that's how he feels and yada, yada, yada. But so what? It's a real thing. People feel that way. And having a character in the movie that feels that way does not make it fall apart. So it's just absurd. It's an absurd thing to say. And going back to what I said before, he talks about how all the white men in the movie are bad. Well, that's not true. Batman's white. And yes, he's depicted as flawed, but again, that's because they can develop the character. You're supposed to have characters in movies that aren't perfect, that evolve over time. It's called storytelling. It's called character development. Not only that, in the scene where and Riddler's white and evil, by the way, if I didn't mention that before. He's white in the comic book. What were they supposed to do? Anyway, I thought of Riddler because he shoots, spoiler alert, Falcone towards the end of the movie. As Falcone is being walked out by, I guess, Gordon into the street. And as this is occurring, Gordon says, well, the Riddler is wrong or whatever. We cops are not all corrupt. And when he walks out into the street with Falcone from having come from inside the club, he walks into a sea of Gotham cops as he's saying, we're not all corrupt, because those cops are there to help him take down Falcone, or they're there supporting him in doing the job, of policing. And you can see that a bunch of them are white, very clearly, unless I'm remembering incorrectly. So no, not all the white men in the movie are bad. And to the extent that Thomas Wayne he's not bad. He's imperfect. He's flawed. To the extent that Alfred is bad, he's just flawed and imperfect. He's not bad. Falcone is bad. Penguin is bad. But not all the white guys in the movie are bad. That's just ridiculous. And like I said, what were they going to do? I covered that in the beginning. I won't repeat myself. But it's just a bunch of nonsense. He's talking nonsense. He just wants to have something to complain about. He doesn't like Bad Robot, where Matt Reeves is from. He worked with Bad Robot. And just wants to be negative, I think. I don't know whether it's for kicks or clicks or both, but it's just a bunch of nonsense. It's nonsense. The movie simply depicts a corrupt Gotham, which is from the comics. It depicts white bad guys from the comics. And a character having a point of view does not ruin a movie. It's just part of life that characters have points of view, and it's being thrown into the mix as part of that character's makeup. Same thing for Batman being a rich guy who's out of touch to a certain degree. It's just something that's there as part of his makeup that, can be developed. So I don't know. I wish they didn't make videos like this. And I wish they didn't say things like this, because it's just divisive. And that's never good. So that's all I wanted to say. Andre, if I've got you all wrong, you can let me know. I'm happy to air your response to what I'm saying, if you even see this. but just cut it out, will you? Okay, until the next video, I'm out of here. Peace and long life.